Les familles, amis, qui docteur bal mauvais remède, qui cause de mourir parce que te bal mauvais soin. Yo fait discrimination contre nous ka aider avec tout problème ça yo. C'est juste que nous dans 866 945 47 68. Bon dit ou pas tracasser tête tout puisque nous parlons plusieurs langues. Nous parlons espagnol, nous parlons créole. Un jour là au groupe office principal nous dans Boca Raton dans Florida. Regardez, depuis après l'avocat, nous voulons c'est nous rele.
You were the word at the beginning, one with God the Lord Most High. Your hidden glory in creation, now revealed in you, our Christ. What a beautiful name it is. What a beautiful name it is.
Bonsoir.
N'a dit tout le monde bonsoir. Comment est Wob?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm good. So n'a dit tout le monde West Palm Beach, Boca Raton, Wildwood, Miami, Orlando, Port St. Lucie, Fort Pierce. N'a dit tout le monde bonsoir. Je dis encore nous ensemble avec nous pour l'autre émission. N'a dit si moun yo ta envie participer dans show ensemble avec nous. Yo ka toujours relé nous et dans radio là jodi qu'on y a là même passer nous live dans radio dans 561 576 1600 numéro radio c'est 561 576 1600 et si mon yo ta besoin relé office là tout pour ta contacter nous si yo gen n'importe question yo ka relé nous dans 866 945 47 68 866 945 47 68. Quelle que soit la question mon yo gen yo ka relé nous poser nous quelle que soit la question yo gen et nous prêt pour nous répondre yo nous gen monde là qui parle créole nous parle anglais nous parle espagnol gen monde qui parle portugais dans office là. Hey Wob, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. Thanks for having us. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, thank you very much for having us here. It's been a pleasure to be here as always.
Yeah, no bien content nous là aujourd'hui parce que Wob, people keep asking me questions since last week about medical malpractice. Some people told me if we can at least talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we've been talking about last week. We've actually had a lot of conversations about some things that have been happening in the news.
Yeah.
And we've been getting a lot of calls, as you know, Claude.
Yeah.
We've been getting a lot of calls at the office lately for medical malpractice cases.
Yeah, medical malpractice cases.
Yeah, medical malpractice cases. So, yeah, it's a great topic. I did want to speak about it and give people some information.
Okay.
Particularly in light of what's been going on lately, but just in general about medical malpractice.
Yeah, so basically, how do I know I have a medical malpractice case?
You know, that's a good question. You know, medical malpractice, it has its own nuances. It's very different in some respects from other cases. And in many respects, it's very similar to other cases. Medical malpractice, like any claim in Florida, is based on negligence, and which is liability. Somebody's at fault because they did something that they shouldn't have done or they didn't follow the standard of care. And, of course, injury or damages, what happened as a result of that. So those are the two premises for any type of an injury claim, including medical malpractice claims.
Okay. Négligence, so problème medical malpractice, ça c'est négligence avec liability. So c'est deux bagages principales so qui gagne. Basically it's the same like
very similar.
Auto accident.
Very similar to auto accident, very similar to slip falls, only in the sense of what you're looking for. The underlying premise is, hey, did somebody do something? They didn't follow the standard of care.
Okay.
They did something in violation of the standard of care. They breached their duty their duties that they have to keep people safe and to do the right, basically do the right thing. Did they do something at fault? And as a result, was somebody injured? Did somebody suffer a loss as a result of that? So that's really what you're looking for, negligence and damages. Those are the two parts of every case.
So c'est négligence avec dommage. C'est ça qui passe dans medical malpractice. Presque même avec l'homme qui fait accident machine. C'est des bagages qui qui primordial dans situation ça, c'est négligence avec damage. But the question is, how do I know, like let's say I went to a doctor or I went to a hospital, they did something wrong to me and I feel uncomfortable about that, but how do I know I have a case?
You've hit the nail right on the head. You're really not sure because you don't know until you find out what happened. Sometimes bad things happen and it's nobody's fault. Other times somebody did something wrong or didn't do something they should have done, and it is their fault.
Okay.
So you really need to investigate it. And the way to investigate it as an attorney, that's what we do.
Okay.
When we take a case, we're looking at it, somebody comes to us, and the way they come to us is because they suffered something as a result of a medical situation.
Yep.
And whatever it might be. And then it's up to us to go ahead and investigate it and find out what happened. Was it a result of negligence? Was it a result of what's called the breach of the standard of care in the industry?
Okay.
Did they do something that they shouldn't have done, or did they fail to do something they should have done? Things like that. There's other aspects of it as well, but that's the primary thing that you're looking for. And then once we are able to prove what happened, then we have to show about what the result was. What's the consequence of all of that?
So basically, if anybody went to a hospital or a medical facility, something happened, they're not sure, so they can call us, call the office to find out if they have a case or not.
Exactly. I think this is something that you really need to get expert opinion upon. And first of all, it's required anyway, and there's a lot of requirements in Florida as to how you're required to pursue the claim and the limited amount of time you have to do so.
Okay.
So the things that I would import to people, the things that I think are most important, are number one, if you have a thought or question about whether somebody might have done something that they shouldn't have done or failed to do something they should have done and you were injured, call an experienced attorney. Give us a call at our office. 866 945 4768 866-945-4768. Give us a call. We're happy to evaluate it. There is no charge. We evaluate the claim. If we feel it's worth something that we're going to look into pursuing, then there's things that we have to do, and there's things that have to be done fairly quickly. You've got a very limited amount of time in Florida, so it's very important that you follow those rights right away.
Yeah, when you're talking about time, Rob, can you give us any idea? So
Absolutely.
if I went to a hospital or I went to a clinic, something happened to me, how long I have to wait before I...
In Florida, for most negligence claims, it's 4 years in Florida. But for medical malpractice, it's 2.
Okay, it's
2
2 years.
Now, a lot of things have to happen in that 2 years.
Oh, okay. So basically, sou talon l'hôpital on bagay rive ou bien talon docteur, ou gen 2 ans pour fon bagay à propos de ça.
Now, a lot of things have to happen in those 2 years.
Oh, pendant 2 ans, ça gan pile bagay qui ta supposé happen. Okay.
When you're in a regular situation, slip and fall, automobile accident, things like that, you have to prove certain things. You have to have them ready to go, but you can file your lawsuit as soon as you're able to do that.
Okay.
In medical malpractice, it doesn't work that way. You have to do what's called a screening process, where you actually have to confirm with a professional, have a professional opinion, that there was, in fact, malpractice, a breach of the standard of care.
Oh,
and then once you have that, you have to give them a period of time within which to respond pre-suit. You're not allowed to just jump in and file a lawsuit, unlike other types of cases.
Oh,
so
na cas médico malpractice là, c'est pas même genre cas aksidan ou cas just aller ou faire lawsuit là. Dans cas médico malpractice, il faut un professionnel qui pour garder cas pour avant, qui pour dire est-ce qu'il y a une négligence, une malpractice là-dedans. So c'est là ça, les professionnels là fin ça qu'on y a averti, on y a pris ça avant sur yo. But that's very different.
It is very different. Number one, think about it. You're going to have to hire an expert, which means that we do this as something that we do. We work with a series of experts on different fields, different types of experts, depending upon what you're dealing with.
Okay.
Whether it's a nurse, whether it's a doctor, whether it's a orthopedic surgeon or a neurological surgeon or a neurologist or whatever it might be. So you have to have an expert of the similar qualifications, a similar area of practice. And then he or she has to be able to say whether or not there was negligence, whether or not there was a breach of the standard of care.
Okay.
Before you're allowed to file suit, before you're even allowed to make a claim, essentially.
So basically, if anything happened to it, you advise them if anything happened or they think or they feel like something happened to them, the first thing to do is contact
an attorney. Contact an experienced firm, someone that's handled medical malpractice, that handles these type of cases, and can give you good advice, because these are questions. These are not easy cases, and they're very expensive cases to prosecute.
OK. C'est ça n'a dit mon yo quel que soit sous ta gon question ou bien t'as l'hôpital ou bien ou t'as non docteur on va arriver ou pas à l'aise ensemble avec. So ou toujours les nous dans 866 945 47 68 parce que c'est ça tellement vraiment difficile. So ou besoin monde qui gagne expérience qui compte ça la faire office ça c'est dans Bocaraton numéro c'est 866 945 47 68. So basically what and there's something going on our community right now because of some people they went to school and they get a fake diploma to practice nursing.
Yes, we've been reading all about it and talking about it this past week. Yes.
Basically, if something happened to like a patient, so what's the best way to approach that you think on?
Well, the bottom line is, proving negligence is never easy. And it requires, like I said, it requires an expert opinion. If something happened as a result of a nursing, for example, and we've seen nursing cases over the last few years, we've seen a handful of nursing cases. And when something happens because a nurse did something wrong or fail to meet the standard of care in the industry, you do look at their educational and their qualifications and things like that, and it becomes even more significant when you have this situation. And for those that aren't familiar with what happened, there was, I think, 3 schools, as I understand it. There were about 3 nursing schools that were inadvertently involved, where people were selling fake certificates and fake transcripts that you could pay for, and it would be as if you took the classes and you have all these grades, and then you use that as the springboard, because that's what qualifies you to take a state licensing exam. You have to have that certificate.
Okay.
They then take the state licensing exam, and about a third of them actually passed. About 7,500 people were involved, and about a little over 2,000 of them actually passed, whether it be in Florida, New York. Okay. And the problem here was, when they passed in other states, Florida has what's called reciprocity, where we will accept the credentials from another state, like, for example, New York. And New York seemed to be one of the big states where people were passing these tests in New York, having gotten these fake certifications, and then coming down here to practice. And the Florida would recognize that. So it comes back to, who's responsible. It comes back to who was hiring that nurse.
Okay.
And there's a lot to it. It's not as simple as it sounds. It's a very complicated issue, but it is certainly something that in this time, this particular time, this slice of time right now, we're dealing with it.
Yeah.
The community is dealing with it.
But Rob, I have a question. Can somebody be personally responsible for that?
Anytime, with exception, anytime that you yourself have committed something that's called negligence, where you've failed to meet the standard of care or breached the standard of care, under most circumstances, the individual can be held responsible. Not all, but under most circumstances, they can.
Attendez, mon yo, parce quel que soit l'air on monte à fond négligence, des fois, ou cas responsable pour négligence ou faire.
But the reality is, as a lawyer, you're looking to see who else could be responsible. Not just the nurse, but who hired the nurse. Was there training involved? Was there a lack of training involved? Was there oversight or a lack of oversight?
Okay.
And you're looking at, for example, if they came through an agency. Well, then the agency is obviously someone you're going to be looking at. If they came through a hospital, you're going to be looking at the hospital. And that goes with regardless of whether they have a legitimate license, a legitimate background, legitimate qualifications, or if they're part of this little scam that was uncovered recently.
Okay.
Irrespective of that, you always look at these issues.
Okay. So basically, Rob, I have another question. I have a lot of questions for you because people keep asking me. But when you do involve in a car accident, for example, sometimes you tell people to document the act. So take picture, video, and slip and fall, same thing. You have to make sure you let somebody know you slip and fall. And then if you can take some picture, that will be good. What about in case of a medical malpractice?
That's a good question. Medical malpractice is documented by the records themselves.
Okay.
But you still have to report whether you're injured or not.
Okay. So, dans car accident, slip and fall car accident, avocat toujours dit moun yo pour yo documenter ça qui t'est passé, si vous prendre vidéo, vous prendre photo, li vraiment important, il vient faire travail là plus facile pour lui. Ni le monde glisser tomber tout dans le non-stop glisser tomber tout ton cas prendre photo, cas faire vidéo, les plus bon. Mais les non cas medical malpractice, c'est medical record yo qui pral bail qui ça qui t'est passé dans les monde n'a prendre traitement.
Now, that said, photographs are always very helpful. Videos are always very helpful. For example, if you have an injury that, an open wound or some other, I can't, whatever the injury might be, if it's something that is apparent by looking at it, then yes, you want to document that. Particularly if it's something that's going to fade over time or become a scar as opposed to an open wound. It's always great to document the stages of recovery.
Okay.
From the time of that you first are injured and what that looks like, assuming it's something that is visible.
Okay.
Something that you can actually perceive.
Okay.
So that's always a good idea as well.
C'est toujours bon sinon mon tag un côté qui blessé en pile qui pral guérir si pendant ça c'est ton cas documenté et bagay so le tap vraiment bon. Basically, Rob, can you give the phone number?
Absolutely.
And people they like when you give the phone number.
I appreciate that. Testing me on my Creole. I get it. If you have a question, give us a call at our office. 866 945 4768 866-945-4768. And as you said at the very beginning, we have somebody who speaks Creole. You're a paralegal at our office. You speak Creole. We have somebody who speaks Spanish. We have people who speak Portuguese. And, of course, we have people that speak English. So we've got as many languages covered as we seem to have people in the community that we're responsive to. But, the most important thing is if you have a question, get your question answered.
Arrêtez sur n'importe question gain. Rele nous et n'a répondre question pour même les qu'on y a là nous live dans radio ka toujours rele nous dans 561 576 1600 nous live dans radio là avocat ka pendant là ka tout répondre question pour mais si ton bail qui mérite l'autre réponse li ka toujours bon numéro téléphone là numéro c'est 866 945 47 68 n'a dit moun yo quelle que soit question gain rele nous pas qu'un bé question pour parce que pas jamais connaît ou bien doit faire un bail qui rive là penser le pas un bail qui est important mais finir vraiment important so jodi à nous là n'a parlé de les monde fait erreur l'on monde dans docteur a fait négligence ou bien endommagé mon n'a parlé de medical malpractice parce que nous jeunes en pile et question sous bail so si tout dans communauté nous a un problème de nurse qui à l'école yo gain faux diplôme yo le prend test mais transcript yo te gen pas bon transcript. So what about one more question I have, if somebody falsely accused that they have a fake diploma a diploma and they fire them for that?
That's a good question. It's raised a lot of issues regarding discrimination. And you and I were chatting about that before.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of discrimination.
It's unfortunate, and yes, and the good news is, in Florida, there's not such great news, with the exception of if you have a contract or you're part of a union or collective bargaining agreement. You don't have very many rights as an employee. We are what's called an at-will employee state. You can be hired or fired for almost any reason.
Okay.
There are exceptions.
Yeah.
And the exceptions are the federally protected classes.
Okay.
Things like you can't be discriminated against based upon race.
Lors non travail avocat de Florida son state. Yo ka revoke yo ka fire non travail à n'importe les. But gain limitation dans ça. Limitation qui ça what's the limitation?
Like for example, race, sex, religion, national origin, handicap. I think there's a couple of others, but they're basic rights that are protected under federal law.
Yeah, si yo moun yo fait discrimination ensemble avant pour couleur, sexe, religion, bagay so protégé en bas loi Florida.
Right. So if you're being falsely accused, and I remember you mentioned something off the air about an advertisement in New York that was taken off because it said we're not going to hire anybody of hate that's Haitian.
Yeah.
And obviously they're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that that's going to happen. Apparently, it's been happening because of this. People are afraid of this, and it was very prevalent within the Haitian community, apparently. The problem is that, like any other profession, there's more people that are doing it right, many more people that are doing it right in the community than those that are not.
Yeah.
But those that are not are the ones in the news.
Yeah.
And those that are not are the ones that are scaring everybody.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself in that situation, you have rights, particularly if you're legitimately went to school and you did what you were expected to do. You took those courses, you passed those courses, you then took the state exam and you passed it.
Yeah,
And
that's
you've
a lot of work.
earned-
That's
and-
a lot of work.
And you've earned that right
Yeah.
to practice as a nurse here in
Okay.
Florida. That's protected to some extent. It's protected by, number one, if you have a contract, a written contract, it's protected by that. But it's also protected by the federal statutes that prohibit discrimination based
Okay.
upon religion, race, and so forth. So now the problem with all of this is you have a very, very limited time within which to pursue those rights. It's within a matter of months rather
Okay.
than years. So if anything like that does happen, you need to move very quickly.
And call
Call an attorney, and the attorney may or may not get involved right away, but they will
Yeah.
certainly steer you in the right direction. And the
Okay.
right direction is always the starting point for something like that.
Okay.
Is almost always the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission.
Okay.
And there's a federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. There's also a state one, but you need to report the claim
Okay.
before you can do anything. You've got a limited amount of time, and there's some rules about it. So you really need to get some good advice before
Okay.
you do that.
Ça veut dire si on monde dans un travail ou même ou à l'école ou fait tout à fait j'on t'a supposé faire yo passer test ou commencer travail parce que c'est haïtien yo t'a fait discrimination contre ou à cause de ça crivé haïtien yo là yo t'a révoqué ou gain recours qu'a fait ou carré relon avocat gon bail qui responsable pour ça même ici rele aussi. So ou ka contacter yo y a dit exactement qui ça pour faire après ça pour un avocat pour être sur cahier d'eau parce que si ou même à l'école ou fait tout à fait bien pas gain raison ou étudier ou passer test yo ou dans clinique ou fait tout à fait bien pas gain raison pour monde ta fait discrimination contre. But one more question, when you go to a doctor they have you sign something, so but most of the time people they don't look when they signing it, they don't know because there's a lot of paperwork to read. So basically they can come back around and say, hey, you did sign, anything happened to you, we're not responsible for that.
You cannot waive certain rights in advance, and those are some of the rights you can't waive. If someone is with exception, like for example, just as an out of the blue, if somebody is at an equestrian farm, for example, the statute allows them to waive certain rights as long as it's posted about the inherent nature of horses. But that's not what you're talking about here.
Yeah.
You're talking about people committing malpractice or
yeah.
potentially committing negligence.
Yeah.
And you're not required to give up those rights. You can't. However, the documents you do sign are very important.
Yeah.
Hiring a doctor is, having a doctor do professional work on you is very important. You always want to get somebody who's reputable, somebody who has a good reputation and so forth, particularly with experience doing what you need them to do, to the extent that's available.
Yeah.
The important thing is this. If you sign documents in Florida, you are presumed to have read it and understood it. It's a presumption.
Okay.
And it is a difficult presumption to overcome. I've even seen some in cases where just because you don't read the language doesn't mean you can overcome that presumption. If you sign the document, that's your choice. It's your overt act to say, I'm going to accept the terms. And that's sort of the way the law looks at it. For the most part, there are exceptions.
Okay.
But for the most part, that's the way the law looks at it. So be very careful. If you're going to sign documents and you're not sure what they are, find out what they are. Ask the question. You have that right.
Ok, quel que soit mon cas, non docteur a des poussi un document, c'est comme ça que tu connais sorcier. C'est ça que fait, sous mon document, si on pas comprendre ni poser question, parce que et Florida, lorsqu'il y a un document, ou gen, yo assume que on connaît exactement qui ça va signer.
No, go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm done.
One of the things I want to, this is a caveat. Now, obviously, we are talking about generalities of law. We're not talking about a specific case. I'm not here giving legal advice about a particular case. And it's very important that people understand that. These are just general principles of law we're talking about.
Okay.
If you have a question about your particular case, talk to an attorney. Give us a call at 866 945 67 But it's very important to understand that.
Yeah, ça avocat parler là, si on sait ba général la parler, c'est pas on ba particulier case on monde la parler. Si on monde a un case pour même, on t'a besoin poser question sur lui, relez nous dans 866 945 47 68. Nimewo encore c'est 866 945 47 68 et nous prend numéro téléphone nous n'importe Et sous ta jeune nous pas pick up téléphone nan, n'a pris le bac quand même. Pas hésiter relé. Et si on monde a voulu poser nos questions tout dans radio là, numéro radio c'est 561 576 1600. So what the last word you have for us today?
Well, first of all, this has been a great topic for me. I have enjoyed talking about it. It's not something we talk about very often.
Very often, yeah.
At least not in this forum. We talk about it all the time at the office because we deal with these cases.
Every day.
But the bottom line is, if you have a question about this or really any other area of law, call us. Give us a call at our office. It's really important that you get your rights and find out what your rights are and protect your rights as quickly as possible. So give us a call at our office.
Quel que soit monde qui t'a une question là, relez nous dans office là 866 945 47 68 numéro c'est et nous couvrir toute Florida net. Yon nan problème moun yo gen, moun yo toujours ap di nou est-ce que si aurait été Naples, Fort Myers, Orlando, est-ce que nous ka représenter nous gen client dans tout côté net dans Florida, nous ka représenter quel que soit côté depuis c'est Florida et numéro c'est 866 945 47 68. But comme c'est vous qui parlez créole, you speak Creole better than me, Rob. So now can you say the number?
Sure. Give us a call at our office at 866 945 47 68 and 866-945-4768. You can also reach us on the internet at yourinjurylawgroup.com or avocatpaula.com.
Et quel que soit des bourrivés sur website là, tout ça mettez dans website là, li traduit pour en créole. Ou pas bien pièce problème même website là facile pour utiliser, la traduit tout ça mettez en créole. So quelle que soit question gagnant ou ka poser question le fini la répondre automatiquement. Si vous voulez parler dans téléphone tout ou ka relé, numéro c'est 866 945 47 68. N'a dit tout le monde merci beaucoup. Nous là pour l'autre semaine next Monday around
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock again. So, in the meantime, même les nous pas dans radio là, mon yo ka toujours les radio si yo gon question, il y a radio à contacter nous ou bien yo même yo ka contacter nous directement dans numéro téléphone nan après bail encore c'est marquer numéro ça en côté, même les nous pas besoin nous qu'on y a, ou pas besoin numéro à qu'on y a. But marquer l'on côté quelle que soit question ta gagné, marquer l'on côté là ka numéro c'est 866 945 47 68. Your Injury Law Group. Merci tout le monde.
Thank you for having us.